Good afternoon. We'd like to have this meeting come to order. This is this Budget Subcommittee, number 1 on Health and Human Services. We welcome you. We will be joined by other members. Let us start first with establishing the roll, please. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Thurman.
Here.
Bonta.
Here.
Chu. Grove.
Here.
Jones.
Thank you. We're going to change our agenda order today. We have a number of issues related to the Department of Developmental Services, and we have a high volume of folks who've come forward who wish to speak and hear those issues. So we'll be taking those issues first. We will start, though, first with hearing a proposal from the Department of Rehabilitation, and then we'll move right into the DDS issues. We have many, many topics to cover today. So as has been the theme all year, we'll be asking all presenters and all speakers to be very brief. We want to give everyone an opportunity to have a chance to have their perspective heard. So in that respect, I'm asking all presenters to give a very brief overview, high-level overview of what the issue is, so that the committee members can ask some questions. We can have public comment, and public comment is going to be very, very, very brief. It will give you an opportunity to state your name, the organization that you represent, and your position, either in favor or against the particular item. So you'll have about 30 seconds to do that on public comment. We're going to take all of the DDS issues together as a group and public comment afterwards. So just want to give people a sense that you'll have an opportunity to speak after we've heard all the issues. If we've already addressed your issue and we've addressed it satisfactorily to you, you don't need to speak on it. We do welcome your support, and we especially appreciate you giving everyone an opportunity to be heard. So with that, welcome, and let us get underway. We're glad to have the director here, and we look forward, Mr. Xavier, to your testimony. Thank you.
Chairman, members of the committee, thank you. Joe Xavier, Director for the Department of Rehabilitation. I have Tina Watson and Teresa Corielli, members of our executive staff, here with me today. The agenda does a good job of describing the issue. I just wanted to highlight a couple of quick things in the interest of time, as you've said. There's a new requirement established by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. It requires that we match 50% of our supported employment grants. So we're asking for $155,000 of general fund to do so. And 50% of this grant is now required to be spent on services to youth between the ages of 14 and 24. So I can stop there. Take any questions you may have on our caseload or the dollars or other questions you may have for us. Thank you.
Go ahead and proceed. Do you have other items that you want to present on?
I believe this is the only item we have.
Got it. Were you going to add something?
No.
Okay. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the proposal from the Department of Rehabilitation? Well then, sir, you're off the hook. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
This item's going to stay open, and we'll continue the conversation. Thank you. As our presenters come forward, I want to make a few remarks to help shape our conversation today. We intend to have a very rich discussion on a number of issues that impact those who are served by the Department of Developmental Services and by regional centers and by community groups in the community that serve those in DDS. Today, we're going to hear about many issues. One, we'll hear about rates. We'll hear about the proposal that the Lanterman Coalition has brought forward for a 10% rate restoration. We'll hear about those. And as someone who has spent years working in this community, you betcha this is something I'm very, very concerned about. As somebody who's been a social worker, a regional center social worker, who's worked in the community, who's worked for supported living agencies, I am deeply concerned about the many, many cuts that our agencies have had to take, both the regional centers and the agencies that serve in the community. You betcha, if you ask me if I think that our agencies need to be restored and to have the dollars to properly serve our consumers and families, you betcha you're damn right that we need it. I don't want there to be any confusion about where I stand on this issue. I'm not going to get into percentages or what I think the percentage should be. I want to give this committee the opportunity to do its work on this issue and to hear from the department and to work very closely with the department. But I want all the advocates who've come here today to know we appreciate how hard you work in the community and at the regional center, and we disagree with any effort to try and say that one side of the community deserves funding and the other one does not. We believe that regional center operations need to be properly funded. We believe that community-based organizations that serve our consumers need to be properly funded. And we will have a conversation about how we think that plays out. So I just want to get that right there on the record. We welcome your comment and public comment. But if you've heard anything that suggests different, be clear. We do not support separating out the needs of our community-based organizations or our regional center operations. We believe both need to be properly funded. I'd like to also speak to the issue of the developmental centers. And as you know from the governor's mid-year proposal, he has proposed some closure timelines for a number of the developmental centers. We understand this is a very emotional issue, as many have been served in developmental services for years, in some cases, decades. And we know that this is a very difficult issue. The first thing I learned as a social worker at the regional center, every decision you make for any consumer has to always be based on their individual program plan. Not how much money the service costs or how much it doesn't cost, what is in the best interest of that individual's quality of life. From my perspective, that is what should drive how the conversations about the developmental centers should go. And to the degree that we've accepted that these developmental centers will close, we want to have a process that is open and first and foremost considers the need of the consumer and his or her family for how we do that. In that respect, I'm very excited to announce that we'll be working very closely with the department, with the secretary, with the director of DDS, with stakeholders on creating a transition plan, a stakeholder group to speak to how closures should take place. Naturally, we'll start with the Sonoma Developmental Center with this work group because it is one of the ones proposed by the governor that would close the soonest. So we will create an opportunity for every assembly member and senator who represents constituents at Sonoma, for every family member, for consumers, for employee groups, and for interested public party members to participate in the conversation about how closure should take place. This subcommittee will not articulate what the closure date will be because this subcommittee does not have the ability to do so. But at the end of the day, we will make decisions for each and every individual consumer based on his individual or her individual needs as outlined in their individual program plan. But we will make sure that we work closely with the department to ensure that those needs are met and that everyone who has a feeling on this subject has an opportunity for his or her voice to be heard. Any questions? I want to be clear because we welcome your participation, but we want to make sure that everything that we support at the end of the day starts and ends with the needs of the individual served. Thank you very much. With that, I want to call the first group of presenters to provide us with an overview. We want to welcome Dwayne LaFawn from the Department of Developmental Centers Division, John Doyle from the Deputy Director of the Department of Developmental Services, Santi Rogers, and representatives from Finance and the LAO's office. When you're ready. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Assemblymember Thurman and members. First and foremost, thank you very much for giving everyone a better job of the opening statement I was going to make. Relative to what we have in front of us. Thank you for that. The second part is that the outline that we have in front of many key issues, and they began in 1968. You and I have spoken before relative to the incredible history of the Lanterman Developmental Disability Services Act, and you just did a superior job of outlining its basic values in it. The individual plan is sacrosanct, and that's what we are all about here. I think the issues in front of us require a lot of time today, and we really want to devote our time to sharing those with you. But really, I wanted to bring to you the Health and Human Services Secretary, Diana Dooley's, as you already mentioned, her concerted commitment to everything you also said today. And with that, I think we can move forward on a number of the issues already listed in this good write-up. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Assemblymember Thurman and committee members. I'm Nancy Bargman, Deputy Director of the Department of Developmental Services in the Community Services Division. So what I'm going to do for you today is to go over Issue 1 regarding the community services, the development side of what we're looking at and outlined in the agenda today. So referring back to the agenda, when we're looking at developing resources and building the capacity in the community, one of the things I really want to point out, and certainly Assemblymember Thurman, you certainly outlined it very perfectly as far as taking a look at what are the needs of the individuals very specifically, how do we develop resources that are safe, that are really taking a look at the person, that making sure that we're building the capacity that mirrors what those needs are. So, but we do also recognize that we have a real need to have an initial investment right now to develop resources in ensuring that we have a capacity in the community to start with looking to the plan that has been presented for the closure of the developmental centers and the closure of Sonoma ultimately at the end of 2018. So to that end, and recognizing that the stakeholder process and working with families and consumers is going to be of utmost priority in the process, what we do have today, though, is a proposal which reflects for $49.3 million as far as total funds that would be for community placement plan funding in addition to what we currently have. So this is an initial investment in community placement plan to develop the community capacity. And how that breaks down is that we're looking at having $46.7 million that would be earmarked very specifically to develop the startup activities for residential homes related to the community up in Northern California for the residents for Sonoma, as well as all of the other development needs that could be everything from supported living services certainly is an investment that we want to make sure that we adhere to. We want to make sure that we also have an investment in resources in the community for health care services, for training, looking at the mental health services, making sure that we have the ancillary supports that will be needed for the individuals that are currently residents at Sonoma. In addition, there is $1.3 million that's identified for the regional center coordination, and I will go into that in just a couple of minutes. But then we also have $1.3 million for state coordination, which would be for the Department of Developmental Services and Department of Social Services, which we'll review at a later time. Just real quickly, when we're taking a look at the assumptions to build to the startup funds that we're looking at being available for building the capacity, we're looking to have an investment of 58 separate homes that would be for building for the 962 homes, as they're often referenced as, the adult residential facilities for individuals with specialized health care needs, also for any specialized residential facilities for individuals who have challenging behaviors or really have unique needs that we need to make sure that we're meeting those needs, as well as in enhanced behavioral supports homes, which is a new model of service that was approved in statute last year. This capacity is estimated to be able to yield about an increase of 227 resources for individuals presently at Sonoma. As I had mentioned, we also were looking at developing supported living services, transportation, day and employment services, as well as making sure that the training is available. Regarding the regional center operations, we're making some assumptions as far as what would be needed in ensuring that we're able to expedite the development, recognizing that investing the time and being very thoughtful in how we're going to be developing those resources. We did a projection as far as the need for the number of positions in supporting the regional centers in their efforts. Included in our projections, but we would want to work closely with the regional centers in identifying what their needs are. We're identifying on a cursory level is looking at resource developers, behavior specialists, housing specialists, nurse specialists, healthcare plan specialists, ensuring that we can help support individuals who are transitioning from the developmental center to the community as they're working and ensuring that they have their health care plans available to them as they're moving to the community. Dental coordinators, quality risk management specialists, as well as having fiscal management to ensure that we're tracking the financial dollars that we're investing. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just ask briefly if members have any questions thus far. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, please proceed.
Good afternoon. Dwayne LaFond with DDS. We're going to move on, if that's okay, with the Landman closure part. Again, this is just a quick update. We are continuing to work with California State University Pomona on the MOU to transfer over the jurisdiction to Cal State University of Pomona. We'll be meeting on an ongoing basis still with them. We will have our own MOU on how property there is distributed and dispersed and will be moved over to them. So we're hoping to have something for that in the next few months. And that's pretty much it on the Landman closure.
Thank you. Are there other items to present here? Anything from finance? Anything from the LAO's office?
Sean Martin with the Legislative Analyst's Office. We have a number of recommendations that are outlined in the agenda. First is to adopt the trailer bill language that was proposed by the administration, but to adopt it as placeholder trailer bill language to allow continued discussions between the administration and the legislature regarding that piece of legislation. Our second recommendation is to approve the requested resources, the $46.9 million general fund, to begin the development of resources necessary to support Sonoma DC residents in the community. We think this is consistent with existing state and federal policy. Third, we recommend the legislature require the department to report at hearings regarding which closure activities are allowable under current law and which closure activities are only allowable once the department has received legislative approval of the closure plan that it's required to submit by April 1st. Our understanding is the department intends to submit this plan by October 1st. And finally, we recommend that the legislature require the department to report on what measures will be put in place to safeguard the health and safety of developmental center residents who are transitioning to the community. We note that this transition, as proposed by the administration, is they're planning to accomplish it in 6 years. The last two developmental center closures took 5 years and 6 years, and they were closing one developmental center at a time. So we think it's particularly important to have measures in place to ensure the residents' health and safety.
Ms. Gruff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess I have a question. It says that they're not going to submit the plan for closure until, with the waiting on the approval for the legislature till October. We're going to be gone. The legislature is gone. Why are we not getting that sooner so that we can make a decision? Otherwise, we have to wait till January 2016 to make a decision. So why are we not getting that sooner?
Ms. Grove, John Doyle, Department of Developmental Services. The Welfare and Institutions Code outlines requirements that the department must comply with before we can submit a closure plan to the legislature. And in those requirements, we have to meet with a number of stakeholder groups, get their, we have to solicit input from them, get their feedback on issues, and the information they provide to us helps inform the plan that we will put forward. Given that, we're almost in June, we don't think it's possible to compile all that information and put forward a thoughtful plan prior to October 1st. that's why we are proposing that in the trailer bill language.
Okay, thank you. I know that the chair took an opportunity to share with the public that's here, but I want to take an opportunity to put on record that I do applaud the governor, the speaker, and the chair of this committee for taking the lead in making sure that we shut down these developmental centers. I know it's a very touchy subject, but I also have met hundreds of people that have left the developmental center community or the developmental center environment and have thrived in the community. And so I think it's very important that we give every individual the opportunity to succeed outside of those brick walls in that institution. I am, however, very disappointed that we did not address funding for the community, especially if we're going to move another 1,100 people. And when I think about the community itself, I don't think they've had a raise in the last decade, and the raise that they did get was taken from them. When I look at $1 billion in cuts to the community that have happened over since 2009 and 10, just 5 years ago, it's $1 billion that's been taken from them. They've given that up. And then they've also saved $400 million with people leaving those institutions and the cost reduction that takes place in the community over the last 8 years. If you were to calculate a CPI, just a regular index, it'd be a 29 to 30% increase that we owe the community to keep the promise for the Latterman Coalition. They're just asking for 10%. So I would really like, I applaud the governor. I applaud him. When I first met the director, Santee Rogers, and I looked at your history and your background and your resume, I really believe that the governor was already on a plan to be able to close these institutions down because that is your background. So I applaud him for that overwhelmingly. And, I just think he just really took the lead on this to do this. And I just want to make sure that we're fair to the community when it comes to funding, and not just for regional centers, but for services that are offered within the community. And so having said that, again, the chair is a big part of that, and I do support the 10% increase for the Latterman Coalition. I think it should be 29%, but, let's get 10 if we can get it. I do have a question, though. The properties that are associated with this, to me it seems like we should let the properties become an asset as well, and not just transfer from one department to the other department. Who has authority over that, and where does that come from? So like if we wanted to give the property to, not give it, but sell it for $1, kind of like you converted the UC Irvine or the Channel Islands, Cal State Channel Islands property, how do we allow the local community that's going to lose that asset for those jobs the opportunity to do what they feel is okay within their own community, so that, like Assemblymember Dodd and Senator McGuire, they can go back to their community and go, look, we need to shut these facilities down if they did this, but this is the benefit that we get. We get to turn this into a winery, a housing development, a veterans home, a whatever it is. How can we make sure that the local community has the direct acquisition of these assets?
Well, the department is obviously a tenant there. The Department of General Services is the landlord. But the Department of Developmental Services has been attending the Sonoma Developmental Center Coalition meetings, and we are well apprised of the concerns that the community has and what they would like to see the property at Sonoma look like in the future. So we're keeping their concerns and recommendations in mind as we move forward.
Is there a priority to shut down the decertified units in Sonoma before anything else? Like, is there a priority? They're already decertified. They're already not even receiving federal dollars. We're required to backfill them. Is there a priority to take those decertified, non-functioning units and bring them, get the people out of there first?
I'll let our program expert answer that.
Sure.
Yes. We're really doing it a person at a time, even within the center. There is a plan right now to downsize by one non-certified residence in the next couple of months. Some of those folks will go to other residences that are non-certified, but some will go to residences that are certified. So we will be changing the numbers. Right now we're at about 157 in the certified residences. It'll be about to 161 once we close this one residence down.
You get $80 million right now to move people into community annually. Is that about right? $80 million?
Hi, Nancy Bargman. With the $80 million, I think you're referring to the CPP funds that's for current year.
Okay.
And included in the current year, we have I think we have to almost look at budget year, because current year includes $13 million that we had infused to develop the new models of service. So we're really looking every year about $67 million on an annual basis for community placement plan. About 22 to 24 million of that is actually used to develop the resources in the community. There's a portion, again, about 20 million that's earmarked for placement cost, and then there's there's the assessment process, and then also some other deflection costs. So when we get to that total dollar amount, it really is developing the resources with about $22 million.
Okay. Didn't you guys know Jackie at STEP?
Yes.
I mean, you give her $80 million, she'd find a home for everybody. It'd be a really good home.
Yeah.
Look at, they all agree. They probably work with her. I guess the final question that I have before the chair comes back, the final question that I have is, and maybe finance is going to have to answer this for me. So if this money, this $500 million, when you talk about money that goes to the DCs, if it goes back into the general fund, is that going to be subject to Prop 98 funds and everything as well? Because my goal is to try to get the money that's being funded for these DCs, at least a huge portion of it, to go to the community. I mean, it's for the same population. So you're funding $500 million for the DCs, but if they're no longer there, why can't we put a huge portion of $400 million restores everything that was the 10% cut, another $400 million, which is not even half of what we spent in the last 5 years on these DCs, where I have a huge issue with them, and you guys know that. How do we get that money to the community when it goes back into the general fund? Why can't we just allocate it? Is that Mr. Thurman's job?
Yeah.
If you're gonna implicate me, then I'll speak on it. I just want to reiterate that because this is such a complicated issue, because we have to make decisions about individuals served, and everyone's needs are different, it really would be premature for us to make decisions about where money would get spent or how the buildings would get used. First step is we have to make decisions for every single individual served who lives in a developmental center. What is in her or his best interest? How do we serve them safely and soundly in the community? From there can be conversations about what happens to a DC or what happens if there are savings in the budget. But our first step is what's in the best interest of the people served. We're going to make that our first priority. And this stakeholder group that I'm very excited will be co-convening as part of, through this sub-1 capacity. As chair, I've had a chance to speak with the director and with the secretary, and I'm excited that we'll be working together on a working group, starting with the Sonoma Developmental Center, to look at all these issues and all these questions. And we welcome every single constituent group and stakeholder group to be a part of that. And so we're going to need time to get the answers to those questions. But right now, our first step is how do we make sure everyone can live in the community safely and in the right setting for their needs.
And I agree with the chair. We need to make sure that that they can be moved safely and be taken care of in the community. That's not even an issue with me. I need to make sure that I agree with the chair completely. But what I don't want to happen is the way that government moves slower than molasses. I don't want people to be moved into the community while the community is starving to provide services, add more people to the community, and still have that starving effect going on. So I think that a simultaneous discussion on how we're going to make sure the community is funded adequately to not only take care of the residents or the consumers coming out of the DC into the community, but the people who have already made that transition that are literally starving in the community because the community has been cut. So I want to make sure that that gets taken care of as well. Thank you.
Director Rogers, did you want to add? I know that there are, this all has to ultimately get, embedded in legislation. This committee won't be taking those actions today, but individually as members of the legislature, we will have that opportunity. But are there other timelines that you want to speak to that the department is required to act on, or that the legislation must come at which time point to set out those closure dates?
So thank you, Chairman Thurman. I just want to add, because as you go through this great agenda, I think we'll be addressing some of those issues and address some explanation, but not the complete step-by-step explanation, because we are at that critical part we empathize with Assembly Member Grove's concern because we share the same concern relative to individual plans. And some of this planning will be as part of the group process that has already been outlined here and just spoken of. The other part you want to keep awareness of, we're working we hope, we think so, I'm optimistic, the Health and Human Services Secretary is optimistic, with the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services as part of those intricate parts of funding the services at Sonoma Developmental Centers and the other developmental centers during the whole transition that we're just now outlining with you. So you really want to stay focused on that. We'll be more than happy to tell you at each juncture of that progress. And that is one aspect of continuation of funding.
Thank you. And then also, if you wouldn't mind, let us know, let me know. I know they would be interested as well, but let us know what we can do to help. You know, I was talking to a group of consumers, and they found there was a great home, apparently, and some people from the department, but it had a swimming pool. Apparently, people in the community can't have a swimming pool. You know, why? I mean, I'm assuming that something happened years ago and somebody drowned or whatever the case may be, but I mean, that's just an example, but what can we do or to help make it easier to provide homes in the community setting?
For now, let's move on.
Okay.
I'd like to move on to the next issue, which is Sonoma Developmental Center backfill update. Please present.
Yes, thank you, Assemblymember Dwayne LaFawn. This is current year $4.4 million in reimbursement authority for the backfill on the 4 non-certified residences at Sonoma, and in the coming fiscal year, $13.2 million in the reimbursement authority. As I mentioned earlier, we started with those 4 residences with 112 individuals. We're down to about 70 on those 4 residences now on our preparing to close one. We are still staying under our 178 cap of what we can bill for at Sonoma on the certified ICF units. So we're continuing forward with that. But again, it's a person-by-person, where do they best fit as we consolidate down within the services that are being provided at Sonoma.